So welcome to Digital Value Creation. I'm here today with Kyle Garman. Kyle is an SVP of Global Business Development at SAP, and he's also a best-selling author of The Entrepreneurial Mindset. Welcome, Kyle.
Great to be here, Tomas.
So I actually want to get started with your background. You have a fascinating background. You spent a lot of time in technology and spent time in investing, and now you got to a book. So I want to hear a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, well, thanks for the question, Tomas. And again, congrats on your success with this platform. I think it's a fantastic way to get these conversations out there. Background-wise, I started out in strategy consulting at Bain and focused on the technology industry. Did a couple startups that were very successful, and then joined SAP about 18 years ago, thinking I'd be there for a couple of years. And here we are, 18 years later, and I've had a great run and continued to do some really interesting things at SAP. And just in July, I launched a book called The Entrepreneurial Mindset, which is, as you said, a #1 Amazon bestseller. I was fortunate to win an Author of the Year award as well. And it's a topic that I'm quite passionate about. I think it fits it's a certain angle into this sort of digital conversation. So looking forward to talking to you about it today, Tomas.
You're on the board of Nifty, and for those that don't know, is an organization that focuses on helping high school students, especially for disenfranchised neighborhoods, get ahead. And I really like the premise of the book that actually contributes to Nifty in its funding. But because you talk about technology, you talk about the future of work, and you sort of help prepare kids on what that future is going to look like. So would you share what you learned in your putting that book together about that journey and what's to expect?
Yeah, absolutely, Tomas. And you're right, 100% of the proceeds from the book are donated directly to Nifty. I've been fortunate to be on the board of directors of this nonprofit based in New York City for almost 6 years now. And really the fundamental premise of the book is that when you look at the future of work, that we're really not preparing our young people with the kind of mindset they need to operate in this environment of exponential change. And the educational system was, of course, designed based upon the Prussian factory model of education, where you're sort of learning what I call in the book convergent thinking, which is how to get to the right answer. And when you think about the future of work and the nature of exponential change, you really need to have a divergent thinking mindset. So the ability to continuously create and innovate and reimagine possibilities and have a lot of flexibility and adaptability. And so that's the thrust of the book, is using project-based entrepreneurship education within these students to develop their mindset so that they're prepared for this radically different future of work that is in many ways already upon us, but continues at this incredibly exponential pace, especially with COVID accelerating things significantly.
It's interesting. I hear, especially in investment circles, this necessity for growth mindset, which is one common term. And I think what you're talking about is divergent thinking, just constantly looking for ways, I guess, to pivot. Is that what it means?
Yeah, well, there's 8 domains of the entrepreneurial mindset. You can read about in the book. I could talk about a few, but I think if you look at what Satya Nadella did with the growth mindset, and he really put that at the center of his transformation strategy. He basically said, "Look, we're going to take Microsoft from a know-it-all culture to a learn-it-all culture," and the growth mindset was really central to that. I think the entrepreneurial mindset is a little bit different in the sense that it's comprehensive in terms of how to innovate. And how to have a mindset geared towards continuous innovation. And there's sort of 8 domains: creativity, innovation, having a future orientation where you're constantly evaluating trends in the marketplace, understanding how to recognize opportunity, communicating and collaborating with other people, flexibility and adaptability. So it's all these things. When you look at the skills, when the World Economic Forum ranks the top skills, you see this radical shift. And this is really a key point that I make, is that because of this exponential pace of technology, you really need to develop these, right brain, divergent thinking skills, this entrepreneurial mindset to be successful in this era of exponential change, which you and I live in on a daily basis.
You and I live in this daily basis, but it looks like the rest of the world is living this on a daily basis now.
You got it.
So I'm wondering, since you wrote this book, I saw some early versions of this before the crisis, and then it came out. Is there something that you thought about after it was published? They said, well, the crisis may have reinforced some of the points you were making, or maybe you're changing some of the emphasis that you were talking about in the book?
Yeah, I think there's no question that you would probably agree with me, and most people have said things like, COVID has accelerated digital transformation by a factor of 5 years or even 10 years. And so I think the future of work has come a lot faster, than we anticipated, but it looks very similar. I also think what it's done is it's created, and I think this is the theme for the World Economic Forum 2021, it's called the Great Reset. And I think what it's done is it's opened people's minds to really think differently about a broad range of topics, education being one of them. And so my hope is that the door opens to the point where we can actually start to get meaningful change in how we prepare people and how we define what kind of mindset people need to thrive in this era where things change so fast. I mean, how do you build a mindset that is prepared to adapt all the time? And so I think this open-mindedness is there, which I again hope can be helpful to advance the sort of change that I'm looking to achieve in the book.
These are great points, and I think in just day-to-day interactions with my clients and investors I deal with, there's a lot of conversation about how certain companies reacted differently to the crisis, and in many times they take it back to leadership. Not leadership strength or weakness, it's more like mindset. Like certain leaders were more open-minded, looking for signals, and others were trying to still play their playbook that didn't work. Now, you and I have the good or bad fortune of probably living through now 3 crises, probably the dot-com one, the 2008, and now this one. Do you think from a technology industry perspective, do you think it's more of the same in terms of how the industry is going to recover, or this is fundamentally different?
I think it's fundamentally different because I think this time every company is now a technology company. If you're not a technology company, you're not going to be around for very long. And I think that cuts across just about every industry. There may be a few exceptions to that. And I think that is fundamentally different than the dot-com era or the '08 crisis. I think we're just fundamentally in a profoundly different environment going forward in 2020 and beyond. And I think the companies that have adapted, that have moved to digital faster, that have developed a culture of reimagination and recreation and reinvention and constantly revisiting the assumptions that they're making rather than relying on playbooks of the past. And also the speed, I think that's the other dynamic that I think is so different now, is the speed at which you can move. You and I are having this conversation, on a video call. I mean, I'm seeing things move 10 times faster than they were before because there was an expectation when you're building new businesses where you have to meet in person, and that expectation is gone. And so you can pop people all over the world on a Zoom call and get something done in an hour that it used to take 6 to 8 weeks. So I think the speed of change has radically been accelerated as a result of COVID. So I do think this is fundamentally different, profoundly different than any of the other crises we've had in the past.
I thought you had a really dramatic opening to your book, and I want to move on from the book, but this is just I want to ask you about predictions. So you open the book with saying the world is going to change because there's going to be all these digital workers and the human and automation, the human and software interaction. If you step back and look at the crisis and the momentum and the speed, as you're saying, with digital transformation, what are the kinds of things that you get excited about? Saying that what I thought is going to be out there a couple of years out may be getting closer. Are there certain technologies, or are there certain changes, social changes, or otherwise that you think are accelerating?
I think that there's a couple ways to look at this. I mean, one thing is, do we come back after COVID? Does the in-person interaction come back? Do offices look like they did before? I think the answer is no. And so one thing that I'm quite excited about, especially for technology companies, is the ability to recalibrate your cost structure. And so, for example, we're looking at, dumping half of our real estate portfolio. If before it required traveling 10, 15 times to get to an enterprise agreement, or 20 times or 50 times, and now it's only one time and the rest is done through Zoom, you can cut out, and large technology companies can cut out billions of dollars from their travel budget. They can cut billions of dollars out of their real estate budget. So I think the winner, what I get excited about in terms of just who are going to be the winners, I think it's the ones that are adaptive enough to realize how they orchestrate their process changes, recalibrate their cost structures, and really, think about hiring in a distributed model now, which opens up all kinds of possibilities. So I think it's those companies that are thinking so differently. And you see, of course, Twitter and Google, and so, some of that we're going to no longer have any, you work from home forever, right? I think it's those companies that are forward thinking in that regard, because you can get more talent and you can move a lot faster. And I think that's really and you can recalibrate your cost structure. So I think those are some of the key ingredients that I get excited about in terms of who are really going to be the winners of this next era.
It's a great point about cost structure. One of the other interview, we talked about talent barriers. Any tech company in the U.S. heavily relies on foreign workers, typically coming from Asia, bringing unique talent, and it's become difficult because of visa issues and just especially in COVID, travel is just out of the question. And now we're seeing startups basically assemble completely a remote and global workforce. So you no longer have to think in, I have to import people from one area to another, this brain drain that used to be the way of American innovation. Now you can get access to the same resources, the same talent globally. And I think that's absolutely new as well. Is that what you're seeing?
I would agree. And I think the challenge fundamentally going forward is going to be this balancing act of accessing talent wherever it is and operating virtually in, I think, a lower cost environment, lower cost processes that he did in the past. But at the same time, being able to build culture and being able to build the kind of human connections within your company that people feel like the company is an important part of their lives. And I think that's the risk when you go distributed is, how do you develop these kind of, human bonds, human bonds, and also the affinity for the company that you're working for. And so I think that the middle ground is something like a distributed workforce where you're only getting together much less frequently, but you're getting together for high impact social interactions for multiple days at a time. And it's really centered on building culture, building, team building, bonding, those kinds of things. But I think it will happen a lot less, than it did before. I think companies that capitalize on that trend of, hiring all over the world, but also building culture with a lower cost structure are going to be the winners in the years and decades to come.
What do you think that world is going to look like for the current high schoolers and college students? And in full disclosure, I have one of each. What should they be prepared for?
I think this is really where I center the book on. I look out, say, 10 years and say, what is it going to look like? Again, I think COVID has dramatically collapsed this time. But I think at the end of the day, what I argue is what the timeless skill or the timeless piece that I think every young person needs to have is a mindset. And I call it the entrepreneurial mindset. I go through the 8 domains of the mindset. And the reason I use the word timeless is because no matter what hard skills you're developing, I make the case in the book that whatever hard skills, coding skills or whatever hard skill you want to talk about, that the obsolescence rate of those hard skills is going to mirror the exponential pace of technological change. And so you're going to get into this virtuous cycle of skilling and reskilling and reskilling and reskilling. And that's not really a winning strategy. What is a winning strategy? This thing is so disruptive, right? What is a winning strategy is from a younger age, developing our young people with a kind of mindset that is conducive to constant change and is flexible and adaptable and can see opportunities and can navigate opportunities. And that mindset, the entrepreneurial mindset, is what I call timeless, because that's something you'll carry through the entirety of your working life. Whereas certain hard skills are going to come and go, but this entrepreneurial mindset is what's timeless. It's what lasts through the entirety of your working life. So that's the argument I make in the book. I think one thing I would add to that is I think the gig economy. I think we're going to see the gig economy is exploding. If you look at like Generation Z, 53% view the gig economy as their long-term career path. And so I think that this general sense of project-based work. I think that's one of the things, and how do you prepare for that? Same argument I made before, but one of the predictions I would make is that an explosion of fixed and variable cost structures when it comes to talent, with a much bigger portion of it going to a variable cost structure and gig economy workers. And I think people need to be prepared for that.
So let's shift a bit, and you obviously in your role you deal with a lot of customers, large customers at that are making a major technology bets, and those bets are obviously underpinning their strategy. So I have 2 questions. The first question is, have you noticed shifts in your customers? Certain customers probably handle the crisis better and they're coming out with a slightly different strategy than others. Is there something that you're noticing that the winners are doing differently from the laggards, let's say? I
mean, the first segment I would make is there's certain industries that are just fighting for survival: travel, hospitality, those sort of core things, restaurants, certain consumer retail businesses. And so I think it's really about one thing and one thing only, and that's survival and doing whatever you need to do to survive. So there's that segment. On the flip side, you see a lot of businesses, particularly technology businesses, that are, Zoom is the classic case, but there's lots of others that are thriving, in this sort of new work from home and virtual and highly gigged economy, if you will. And so I think it's these companies that are in a position to capitalize on this work from home trend. And I also think that from a digitization of business process perspective, I think that's where we also see, because even in industries that have not been hit so hard, you see this dichotomy of companies that are still operating many of their processes on spreadsheets and those that are highly automated with the latest technology. And in the latter camp, when you're highly automated, you can get visibility into your inventory and you can react much more quickly and make decisions much more quickly. And also, for example, get a view into your cash. From a cash management perspective. So if you don't have real-time access to that data, what we've seen is that companies have really struggled, are the ones that do not have that kind of automation and therefore cannot adapt as rapidly. And those that have struggled mightily just to do the basic things of getting their supply chain in order. Where is their inventory, or what is their cash position? And what changes they have to make. I think that's another big sort of dichotomy that I see.
Kyle, let me make it personal. So in your role, you're an executive, you have a variety of roles. How are you changing how you operate? Because at the end of the day, it's the leaders who set the tone for any organization. So in how you operate, beyond obviously doing more Zoom, that's clear, have you thought about how this last couple of months are changing your own operating model?
Yeah, it's funny because I applied a lot of the things I wrote about in terms of the entrepreneurial mindset, and I actually now apply them to my own life. I'll give you one example. I used to have I generally view interactions with people in the context of collaboration as opposed to competition. And that's, and the reason for that is because of the pace of change is so rapid. You need to have these cross-functional teams and then cross-geographic teams. And so it's no longer about sort of, competing to, navigate into, up an organization, let's say. It's much more about collaboration across cross-functional, across geography. And so it's this collaborative mindset. And what I see is that, you can actually you can innovate much faster, and you can move much faster with this agile, competence and this idea that, everybody's on the same team, and I think what's disappearing is the hierarchies, the whole concept of bureaucracy and rigid organizational structures, they're basically disappearing. And so it no longer matters. What matters is who's taking initiative and who's leading something, who's innovating, and how are they bringing a virtual team together to advance initiative, not necessarily people that are reporting to them, but people from all kinds of geographies and functions within the organization. So I think it's this shift from a bureaucratic structure to an agile structure, a flat organization structure, and then the ability to be a leader without having a huge team of direct reports, for example. I think that's another area where I focused a lot personally, is the ability to just bring virtual teams together and get results without having to rely so much on people that are reporting to you that are therefore accountable directly to you. And so I think that's another thing that I've personally taken on over the last couple of years. And with COVID, I think it's again accelerated even further.
Yeah, you raise a good point with structures disappearing in a way. And one of the comments a client of mine mentioned to me was that in the 90s, there was this whole concept of self-directed work teams. They form themselves, and you don't need a lot of micromanagement and guidance. And I think in this crisis, all the books were thrown out the window. So it naturally, a lot of structures emerged in terms of how people collaborate, to your point, and how they approach work and how they assign work and how they get things done. And I think management science may find a whole new area to research, because this was just nothing that you learned in business school. You sort of have to figure it out as you go.
I love your phrase self-directed teams, because that is another way of saying, articulating the concept I was saying, because it's no longer the case that, this sort of, top-down organization can actually know how to organize to adapt to this rapid change. It's actually people that are in the midst of whatever the initiative or the program or the process that actually, and I think from a people perspective, it's the people that can adapt to this really just new style of working. I think the people that were traditionally just sort of climbing a ladder and building the organization, and that's how they view the world, I think that's really difficult because it doesn't work anymore. It requires a much more entrepreneurial approach, a much more entrepreneurial mindset, a mindset of agility and cross-functional team collaboration, to get things done. And so that's a huge shift, no question.
One of the questions I asked a couple of people was how they think we're coming out of this crisis. And it sort of surprised me because a lot of people thought that the business is going to come out a lot stronger. It's that age-old adage of a crisis creates opportunities. What's your view? Are we going to be much stronger as businesses and tech firms, or are we going to struggle for a while?
I think what we're going to see is a huge bifurcation, really. I think there's going to be, like you look at some of the studies around the average tenure of an S&P 500 company, 20 years ago was something like 35 years, and that's getting cut down to 15, quickly to 10, maybe even to 5 years. And so what I think is, from an investing point of view, I think it requires much more rigor in terms of thinking about the companies that you want to invest in, because there are going to be big winners and big losers. And I think the companies that are going to really struggle, that don't have the ability to reinvent and reimagine their business, they're going to get trampled. And so I think we're approaching an era over the next 10 years. We're going to see a set of really big winners and really big losers. And I think you're going to see companies going out of business at a rate that we haven't seen before. So are we going to emerge stronger? Well, I think it depends on what half of the fence you're on. I mean, I think certain companies will emerge incredibly strong and much stronger, and other companies will go out of business. And I think that's just it's someone used the phrase digital Darwinism, and I think we're maybe that's a way of thinking about it, is that we are in an era where you're going to see some big winners and big losers, and so that's just the reality of the next 10 years, at least as I see it.
I love the term digital Darwinism. I asked others, what technology they get excited about, and some people love blockchain, some people hate it, some people like augmented reality, some others focus on AI, and others think AI is a hype. What is it you get excited about, whether it's an investor as just as a software executive?
So I'm really excited about industry-specific software. I think that's a really big opportunity. I mean, if I think more generally about what technologies I'm excited about, I mean, machine learning, I think, is the real thing. I mean, I think it's the ability to, and I'm not a blockchain fan either. I mean, I think, that you can go either way on that one. But I think machine learning as a technology, you think about all the professions that involve pattern recognition, like a doctor diagnosing a disease, or a lawyer navigating a case, or other professions, an accountant that is having to reconcile financial statements. I mean, these professions where people, a doctor, a doctor, lawyer, accountant, those three were the ones I just named. I think machine learning is tailor-made for those kinds of problems where you're learning and then you're recognizing patterns, and then you're dealing with things on an exception basis. So the one thing I get most excited about is applying machine learning to problems that involve pattern recognition, and to industries that involve a heavy degree of pattern recognition. I think there's just tremendous opportunity in that sweet spot.
So here's my final question for you, and it's sort of a hot seat kind of question. So I'm a young entrepreneur. I'm getting in the elevator, recognize you. You wrote this book about entrepreneurial mind, and we have that 20-second. And I'm going to ask you the questions. What should be top of mind for me? I'm creating a business in 2020. What's your advice for me?
Yeah, I think that the number one advice I would give to a young entrepreneur is to leverage the fact that you're a digital native, and by that I mean that you've grown up in a world that the prior generations didn't grow up in. And so it's really to exploit this competitive advantage that you have as a young person of being a digital native. And what I would say is it's all about identifying problems and creating new solutions. And so that would probably be the second thing I would say is being very focused on understanding what the problem is, how big is it, who's affected by it, how is the problem being solved today, and then leverage your ability as a digital native to come up with new and different and distinct ways to solve those problems. And I think that's the key for young entrepreneurs today, is to sort of stay in this competitive world of competitive advantage that they have with this, heavily digital native backgrounds. And then again, focus on a problem and a solution to that problem that's new and innovative, and stick with it. Stick with it, solve the problem, and then build from there. So that would be the things that I would probably say.
I think we can close on that very inspirational summary. Kyle, it was great to have you today. Thanks for joining me.
Absolutely, Tomas. Thanks for having me. And again, congrats on your success with this platform. I love it, and great to be here.